Good morning. Welcome to Gimpy's History Corner. I'm called Gimpy by my grandsons. This is another Halloween picture. Archie's a rabbit character I can't remember the name of. Ellis is Minecraft Steve. Dad's dressed like a hot dog. Parents like to go out with the kids for trick or treat, and I stay back and pass out candy. Get to meet a lot of people that way. So we're on video number 109, History of the Labor Unions. History of the labor unions in America. Labor unions are rooted in the class struggle, anti-capitalist organizing, and direct action, often led by immigrants, socialists, or anarchists. Ooh, anarchists, that sounds like a good video topic. Okay, the first American labor union were the Knights of Labor. Knights, as in the Knights of the Round Table. These were the Knights of Labor, 1869 to the 1890s. Advocated for abolition of the wage system, or an 8-hour day, and worker cooperation. So I'm not sure what they would replace the wage system with. Their influence peaked during the Great Southwest Railroad Strike of 1886, and they were derailed by the Haymarket bombing. We covered that on a previous video in Chicago. So the Knights of Labor were the first. Then we move on to the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, whose nickname were the Wobblies. IWW Wobblies. Founded in 1905, they were explicitly revolutionary, aiming to unite all workers to overthrow capitalism. Wow. Favored industrial unionism. Direct action, like strikes, sabotage, and solidarity. The Lawrence Textile Strike of 1912, which we've talked about before. The free speech fights of Spokane and San Diego, which I'd never heard of before. And they were obviously heavily repressed by the capitalist government. World War I started, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Communism started to raise its ugly head in Russia, and they were spreading. Eastern European immigrants coming to America. And so we had our first Red Scare. We were identifying communists as Reds. And the leader of the IWW, the Wobblies, was a guy named Big Bill Haywood. And guess what they did with Big Bill? Well, the government arrested him, put him in prison, and then exiled him out of the country. Kind of like, well, if you don't like our capitalist system, we'll send you somewhere where you might be more happy, Bill. Socialists and anarchists and communists in labor. Wow. Eugene V. Debs, railway union leader, ran for president 5 times as the Socialist Party candidate. One of those times he ran while he was in prison. The government put him in prison. But he still ran. Still got some votes. Eugene V. Debs was a pretty strong third-party candidate there for a while. The Communist Party of the USA organized black workers. But then on the other side were the conservative union leaders like Samuel Gompers of the AFL, American Federation of Labor. And he favored incremental gains and avoided confrontation. So this is the early part of the 20th century, 1900s. You had the really radicals, the socialists, the anarchists, the communists on one side, and then you had the conservatives like Samuel Gompers on the other side. The black radical labor was, the first black union was the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, 1925. A sleeping car, obviously, was a train car that had beds in it, bunk beds stacked on top of each other with the curtains. You've seen movies with these before, I'm sure. And the people who helped the sleepers were called porters. And they were almost all, probably all black. So they started their own union, Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, 1925. In the 1960s, you had the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in Detroit. And they were linked to black liberation. I'd never heard of that one in the 1960s. And then out west, you had the Chicanos, indigenous and immigrant labor, United Farm Workers, Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta, combined civil rights and nonviolent resistance. Chavez was a big character in the 1960s. I remember seeing him in the news a lot. Bobby Kennedy went out, met with him, thought a lot of him before he was assassinated. And it kind of ties in with today's immigrant issue. Immigrant farm workers coming from Mexico. They felt they were getting taken advantage of by the big farm owners. And I think they had a strike, farm workers strike. Okay, backing up to the 1990s, you had the Red Scare, like I said before. And then another Red Scare in the 1950s called McCarthy era. McCarthy was a senator, I think, from Minnesota, white guy, who wasn't very popular or even effective as a senator. But he understood that he could get a lot of attention by screaming communism every chance he got. Claimed there were communists in the State Department, which there were. He was right. He claimed there were communists in Hollywood, which there were. And he started having hearings bringing all these people before the world on television in the 1950s. So during that time, the Taft-Hartley Act, 1947, forced labor leaders to pledge to be anti-communists. If you were going to be a labor leader, you had to pledge that you will not push communism. And it consolidated a more conservative leadership in the AFL, which had merged with the CIO, Congress of International Congress. Industrial Organization? Can't remember. Okay, then you had another type of radical union. It was called the Teamsters Union, originally formed in 1905 when they were horse-drawn carriage drivers. And then gradually when trucks came along, they became the Trucking Industry Union. A guy named Jimmy Hoffa became president in 1957. Membership grew to 2 million. Wow. Trucks were big, still are. And Hoffa secured powerful contracts and expanded to all areas of logistics. But then he started loaning money from the Teamster Pension Fund to the Mafia. The Mafia was trying to build up Las Vegas, and banks would not loan them money, because they're the mafia, they're criminals. So they went to Jimmy and said, hey, you got money in that pension fund? He said, yeah. How about loaning us some? So they worked out contracts, just like a bank loan, with interest. And Hoffa loaned them money, and that's how Las Vegas got built. Now, the question is, did the mafia pay it back? Well, according to the records, yes, they did, with interest. So the Teamsters actually made money as a bank would, but the problem was he was loaning money to criminals. So the government kind of came down on Jimmy Hoffa. He was put in jail for jury tampering, conspiracy, and fraud in 1964. President Nixon pardoned him, let him out. And of course, he went missing in 1975. Lots of theories on what happened, but it's assumed that the mafia took him out, buried him somewhere, or put him in an incinerator. The UAW, United Auto Workers, 2017 to 21, had about a dozen officials convicted of embezzlement. Lots of money with unions. It's awful tempting to put some in your pocket. So the United Auto Workers had embezzlement problems. And I was wondering, what's the largest union today? It's teachers. NEA, National Education Association, has 3 million members. Then you have the Service Employees International Union, that's SEIU, has 1.9 million. And AFT, another teachers union, has 1.7 million. You say, what's the difference between the NEA and AFT? Well, I've dealt with both. But the NEA started as like a professional organization, more like a club. And it developed into a union. The AFT is a branch of the AFL, American Federation of Labor. So it started out as a union, negotiating. And typically the AFT has urban schools, and NEA is more suburban and rural. But I'm not sure that's strictly true, because my last district I worked on was a small town, kind of suburban district near Dayton, Ohio, and it was AFT. But most of the districts I worked in, I dealt with the NEA. Now, the classified workers I dealt with were usually AFSCME. It was kind of like the SEIU. AFSCME, I can't remember what that stood for, but the last classified, that's like bus drivers and cooks and custodians. Last union I dealt with before leaving as superintendent was the Teamsters. Wow. Now they were radical. They threatened pickets right off the bat. Teamsters, what in the heck were they doing with custodians and cooks? I don't know how long that lasted, because I left. The United Food and Commercial Workers are 1.2 million. So the biggest unions today are not factory workers. They're more teachers and service workers, because the factories have moved out to other countries, or they moved to the South where there are no unions. So big changes with unions in our country. Okay, that's it for the history of the labor unions. Started out very radical with communists and anarchists, socialists, and we went through that period with lots of violence with our unions, strikes, strike breakers, Pinkertons, federal troops. And today you don't get many strikes. That's kind of an old-fashioned thing that doesn't happen much anymore. And union membership has declined tremendously. So that's just a historical thing, a historical look at labor unions in our country. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.